Hello there, this is Tercio, and we're back in Civilization 6. Now, I wanted to make this video, a really quick video, on how to actually get started in the game, because many people never played any kind of 4X games, they're not very common. And, you know, the most famous one out there is the Civilization series, so if you're new to 4X games, you're likely going to start playing Civilization. Now, Civilization 5 was fairly famous, it was very successful. And I imagine that Civ 6 is going to follow, so there's going to be an influx of very new players to the game. Now, I'm playing as America, as Roosevelt. And I recommend it for very new players, just because they're not very complicated. Their bonuses are very straightforward. As you can see, Roosevelt's corollary, units receive a +5 combat strength on their home continent. We'll get into further details later on. Then we have the Founding Fathers bonus, which earn all government legacy bonuses in half the usual time. Then we get the Rough Rider unique unit, P51, and the film studio. These are all bonuses that you can actually ignore. You don't even have to take them into account, and you'll get them likewise. That's why it's very recommended for beginners. So this is what you always start off with. You start with one settler unit and with one warrior unit. Now the first thing I want you to do is to select your warrior and move him first to position so you can see through the fog of war. Now, all of this, like uncharted map, this is what's called fog of war. We do not know what's in here, so if we move a unit towards it, we'll discover more terrain. So in this case, as you can see, once I selected the warrior unit, it has highlighted the hexes that I can move the warrior unit to. If we check on the lower right part of the screen, we can see the warrior's name. We can see how much strength it has, it's 20, and how many movement points it has. Now, normally, movement points represent one tile at a time, so in theory, this warrior could move 2 tiles. The thing is, certain terrains have a movement cost. So in this case, for example, if this tile here is a plain, okay, it's grassland, it's plain, really easy to walk through, and this one is also a plain, really easy to walk through. So I could spend 1 movement point here and another one here, and I would move in that same turn, okay? But as you can see, if I cross this river to the tile here, that costs my full 2 movement points. I can only move 1 tile. Likewise for forests, if it's a hill, also consumes 2 movement points. That is something to take into account. Now, to discover the most I can of the map, I'm going to move my warrior through here to here. There he goes. And we have discovered the sea. Fantastic. Okay, why do you want to move the warrior first? You want to do that to discover what's around your starting position, just in case you see a more favorable position to settle your first city. Although the first position that we have here, the first thing that we have is a terrain with lots of resources. These little icons indicate special resources. We have silk nearby, 2 stone, a rice, another silk, another rice, and we even have wine here. Now there's different types of resources. If you hover your mouse over the icon, you can see that silk is a luxury resource. If we hover over the stone, we can see it's a bonus resource. The rice is another bonus resource. Silk luxury, copper is bonus. Now there's another type of resource that we didn't get in this starting position, which is the strategic resource. I'll get into detail right now what it means. So a luxury resource give amenities. Amenities are like items that your citizens want to be happy, okay? There's a value later on, you'll see, once we settle the city, that there's a value of happiness, and that is incremented with luxury resources. So the more different luxury resources you have, the happier your people will be. If your people are unhappy, you'll see that there's going to be disadvantages to growth and production. If we hover over the stone, we can see it's a bonus resource. What that means is that it will give additional yields once we work on it. So, yields. We'll get to that as well soon. And then there's the strategic resource, which we don't have any of here, that are needed to build certain units. Let's say you want to build a swordsman. Swordsman needs iron. You would need to work iron, which is a strategic resource, to build that swordsman. That is the only function they have. Now, going back to yields, to the bonus resource, if we go down to map options right down here, and we click on show yield icons, we can see all the yields that each tile gives to us. The corn here indicates food. The cog indicates production. And let's see if I see any different one. Here we go. The music note indicates culture. And there's several other yields that we'll see soon enough. So basically, working a stone, which is a bonus resource, will increase the yields that this tile gives us. I think, if I'm not mistaken, in this case, stone will give us +1 production. That is indicated when we hover with our worker on top of the resource, and it tells us what it's going to give us. Now, in the beginning, if you're completely new to the game, I do hope that you went through the in-game tutorial, because that explains all the basics of the game. If not, you have a video on the channel where I run through the in-game tutorial, and in case you're feeling lazy and don't want to play it, that explains all the basics. Now, I'm overlapping some of the concepts from that tutorial, but I feel that it's really important to go over them in such a manner. So, if it's your first game, as I was saying, I don't want you to worry about city placement. I want you to go and press this button down here, which is Found City, and just found your first city. So your first city is Washington, in the case of the Americans. It is also considered your capital. This is your capital city. It's indicated by this little star next to the name. These lines here, this is your border, your territory. This is what your workers can work at. So if we click on Washington, we can also see that it has a number here, which is number 1. That is the total population of Washington. This is a symbolic number, okay? It doesn't mean that there's only one person in Washington. You probably have more. I like to think of it as every number is like 1,000. So we would have 1,000 people here. This little bar next to the left, this little green bar, will go increasing. That is the number of turns needed to grow your city. Okay, so we have 7 turns to grow to number 2 population. Now, what does this all affect? So, if we go to the city details, or manage citizen, sorry, we can see that our 1 population gives us one tile to be worked. As you can see, this little icon is lighted up, and these ones are turned off. That means that with our 1 population, we are working a tile. We can change that tile if we click on other tiles if we're interested in, like so. You can lock it, you can do whatever you want with that 1 pop. The only tile that you cannot change is the capital one. This is always default. You can't do anything with that. So now you might be asking, what are these yields for? If you remember in the tutorial, food, the more food you have, the quicker your city grows. Now that is really important because you want to increase the population as fast as you can, so you can have multiple workers working on the different tiles around your city. In this case, I only have 1, as I said before, so I can only work 1 tile. Now, it would be interesting if I could increase my growth. So I'm going to actually unselect. Yeah, there we go. Unlock this pop, and I'm going to click on the rice tile. Why? Because it gives me 3 food. That way, we'll be harvesting more food, and our growth will increase. In this case, in this example, the difference is only of 1 food, so it won't affect the total turns. It's still 7, but at least it's more food than before. So that covers tiles and yields. How about we follow what the game tells us now? Down here, normally the game will tell you what's the next thing to do. We have to choose production for our city, so let's click on that. And this is the production screen of the city. Now what you do here is you tell your city what to build. If you hover over the different elements, you can see how much production they cost. So for example, a builder costs 50 production. Our city right now is producing, we can check it here, plus 3 production a turn. So every turn, if I decided to build a builder, for example, every turn the city's going to put 3.1 production towards the builder until it accumulates 50. The moment it accumulates 50, the builder is done. The game already does the calculations for you, as you can see. On the right hand side it says 16 turns to complete. You can actually check it up yourself. You can add up the 3s and you'll see that it definitely takes 16 turns to make. Now, the first decision that you're going to do for production, normally you won't go monument. Don't go monument. You still need to build some units before actually start building some buildings. My recommendation is what the game is recommending right now, to build a scout. Scouts are really they're military units, but they're specialized in exploring the map. They actually have, as you can see, 3 movement points, which is 1 more than the warrior. It has less melee strength because they're not really for fighting, but they're good for moving, so that is what we want. They're actually cheaper to produce as well. Base cost is 30 production, while the warrior is 40 production, so they're quicker to make. So my advice, click on the scout and let the scout come out. Oh, and it seems that the growth bar has updated. I think it takes a while to actually update, but it went from 7 turns to 5. So that's fantastic. As you can see, the tile that I changed here from stone to rice has already bared its fruit. So we're going to need 5 turns to grow a second population. Now, the next step that the game is telling us to do is to choose a research. So let's click on this button here. And it gives us this selection of possible researches that we can do. But I want you to check the bigger picture. I want you to press on this button here, open technology tree. As you can see, these are all the techs that you can do in the whole game. If you scroll all the way to the right, you reach the future tech and all the stuff of the information era. But right now we start in the ancient era, and these are the only things that we can do at the moment: pottery, animal husbandry, mining, sailing, and astrology. These ones that are they're like whited out. These ones you cannot do them yet because you don't fulfill the previous technologies to make them. So these ones are the ones that we can select right now. Now each technology, once completed, gives you a bonus, gives you something. Okay, so for example, pottery, as you can see if you hover your mouse over here, gives you the ability to build granaries, which is a building. If we hover over animal husbandry, it unlocks the pasture improvement and the camp improvement, so on and so forth. These improvements are things that your builders build on top of resources such as stone and rice to start harvesting them. Right now we're not taking advantage of the bonuses of these resources. We need a builder to build an improvement on top of them. We'll get to that once our scout has finished. But we have to look into the future and see which technology would be the best to pick right now. So we have a rice. We have stone in our borders. Silk and stone. This stone one is out of our borders, so we're going to have to wait a bit to actually harvest them. The only ones we can actually touch are stone and rice. If we hover over the stone, it says that we require mining. We do not have the necessary technology to mine the stone. If we hover over the rice, it doesn't say anything. Why? Because rice well, even if it doesn't say here, we already start with the technology of farming. So rice needs farming. We already have that. We can harvest the rice once we get a builder. So the interesting thing would be to get mining so we can harvest that stone once we can. So we're going to click on mining. And as you can see, it says it takes 9 turns. If you hover over the technology, it says it needs 25 science. So how do we get science? Science is just like any other yield, but you can, it's more, science is actually empire-wide, it's not city-wide, like food or production, which only affect the current city. If you go to the left, upper left part, you can see the total science that your empire is creating. It says 2.8 from cities, and then it goes into more detail that those 2.8 come from Washington, which is our only city. If we actually click on Washington and go to the manage citizen screens, no, sorry, change city production maybe? No. Definitely. If we click over Washington and go down to the science yields, we can see where that science is coming from. So +2 from buildings, +2 comes from the palace. The palace is a special building that only your capital has. No other city of your empire will have a palace, unless you want to change your capital. And then we get +0.7 from the population and a 5% from amenities. Now amenities, again, we can see that it's another resource down here. We have +1 amenities. These are what makes your citizens happy. You always want to have a positive balance. And as I told you before, amenities are achieved by luxury resources and also by some certain special buildings that give happiness. Wine, as you can see, is also a luxury resource. It needs irrigation to actually harvest it, so don't worry about that just yet. Another thing about cities is that now they have housing. If you hover down to the bottom left part, you can see that we have 1 of 6 housing. 1 is the population we currently have in Washington, while 6 maximum is the maximum population we can support in Washington. Now, to get more housing, it's really important that you settle next to fresh water. So as you can see, Washington is right next to this river. That is considered fresh water, and that gives us, if I'm not mistaken, +3 housing. So if we didn't settle next to fresh water, we would have a maximum housing capacity of 3. If you settle next to salty water like the sea, that gives you +1 housing, and we would have a maximum of 4. You can actually check this out if you go to lenses. Was it lenses? Nope, it wasn't settler. Here we go, settler. If you choose on the settler lens, which changes the map mode to some colors, you can see the key here. So fresh water is indicated by the green tiles. These tiles that are next to river tiles is what's going to give you +3 housing. Coastal water are the lightly green ones because they're next to the sea. That is going to give you +1 housing. Then these lightly grey ones, these are no water at all. You don't get any bonus in housing, so you get only 3 maximum. And then red, you cannot settle a city there because it's too close to another city. So while our city is growing, we also have to get worried about the housing. We always want to have some free housing left to keep growing the city. Okay, once we selected our technology, the production, we moved our units, and we've explored our starting area, we can press next turn. There we go. Second turn. The game likes to jump to your units in case you forget that you have them. For example, it jumped and auto-selected my warrior, so I can move him. Now I'm going to spend all my movement points to go into this hill. Why? Because hills actually give you more vision. So if I go on top of the hill, I can see further away, which is neat. And I discovered that this is still coastline. Great. As you can see, the numbers are going down. Our scout is now taking 9 turns, and our growth is 4 turns. Our mining has gone down to 8 turns. Fantastic. Now, one thing I forgot to mention is that not only do you have a technology tree, you also have a civics tree, which is it is related to your culture. So as you can see, the game already selects code of laws for you from the beginning, because it's the first tech that you have to do. Code of laws takes 14 turns. Why does it take 14 turns? The same rules to science applies, but with culture. It says code of laws needs 20 culture. We are getting 1.4 culture per turn. In this case, we're getting that from Washington. If we click on Washington and hover over the culture icon, we can see that 1 comes from the palace, 0.3 from the population, and a 5% from the amenities. So great. Now we'll get into detail what these civics do once we finish code of laws, so don't worry about that. We just know it takes 14 turns. It's auto-selected from the start of the game. Don't worry about it just now. Just press next turn and let's go. So the warrior unit, we're going to keep moving and exploring all around us. Really important to uncover this fog of war and see what's around. If you're new, I do recommend leaving the yield icons on, just so you know what you're getting with each tile. Oh. And we discovered a unit from another civ. Well, in this case, not a civ, but a city-state. City-states are one-city countries, so to speak. They're not really players. They act like neutral players, like buffer zones. They're something like Switzerland. And what they do, they're influential, so you can actually influence them to give you bonuses, and you compete with other civilizations in the game for their favor. We'll get into more detail with city-states soon enough. So we're going to keep exploring. The city-state is also exploring Valletta in this case. As you can see, I can click on it and I can check some things out. We won't get much into that just yet, as we're still with the basics, so don't worry about it. So let's keep exploring. We discovered a new copper resource. We hit next turn. And Washington has grown to 2 population. So now if we click on Washington and go to manage citizens, we can see that we now have 2 lighted citizen icons. So now we can actually change 2 from a position. The game tries to auto-select the best tiles that you can harvest. So in this case, it auto-selected the stone one, which gives us 2 food and 1 production. If you check the other tiles, you can actually see that the best is actually the auto-selected one, the stone. This one gives us 2 food. This is 1 food, 1 production, 2 food, 2 food. So that's good. We're optimized right now. So we're going to keep moving our warrior, keep exploring. We don't want to move our warrior very far from the capital, because there's another element in this game which normally really destroys newer players, which are the barbarians. There's always some hordes of barbarians in the beginning of the game, and you'll see why. So we got our scout. Finally, he has been created in Washington. Now, as you can see, highlighted by his blue outline, he has lots of movement points. Now, I don't really want the scout near my city, because I want him to actually do the exploring. My warrior, I'm going to need him for defense against the barbarians. So let's actually move the scout outwards. Oh, and we found sheep. Nice. So the warrior, he's going to keep exploring these outskirts here, but not very far away though. Now that Washington has finished producing a scout, we get to produce something else. So we choose production again. And this time, I would recommend getting a slinger for the extra defense. Now the slinger is a range unit. The difference with the warrior is melee, so it can only attack. It can only attack when it's close to another unit. Range units and change, they can shoot from several tiles away. The slinger is like the first range unit in the game, so you can only shoot with range 1. So it actually has to be next to the enemy to actually be able to attack them. The advantage is they won't receive retaliation. So we're going to click the slinger. Take 6 turns, perfect. Our growth is still going up, 5 turns, great. And as you can see, our borders actually expanded and we encapsulated the wine luxury resource. So there we go. Now we can actually harvest the wine once we get irrigation. Mining still is taking 2 turns. Fine, great. Next turn. Controlling the food. Okay, great. So the warrior is going to move on top of the copper just to check this place out. And the scout, just look at how much it can move. That's great. Let's move him over here. We discover a lot of silk. What we did discover though as well is a tribal village. Now these are fantastic because they give you stuff once you put your unit on top. We'll see that right now. If you come from Civ 5, they're the equivalent of ruins.
Yourself in a hole. Quit digging.
And okay, this is the research completed screen telling us that mining has been done. Great. Now that mining is done, we can choose another research. In this case, I would be interested in getting irrigation just to take advantage of that wine. The problem is, irrigation needs pottery first. Should we get that? Should we? Yes. One little trick that you can do, you can actually click on a technology you cannot research yet, and it will automatically queue the previous ones. So first it's going to do pottery, then it's going to do irrigation. Pottery is going to give us the granary building, as you can see here. The granary gives us +1 food and 2 housing, so that's a good way to actually increase your housing if you didn't settle next to fresh water. Let's move our warriors down here. Let's see what we find. And there's the sound effect of the tribal village that we found, another one. Okay, so let's actually see what this tribal village gives us. We're going to move our scout on top of it. And it gave us an inspiration. The villagers share the secrets of their well-organized community. Your progress towards craftsmanship has advanced considerably. Okay, so there's a mechanic in this game that if you do certain requisites, certain stuff, you can actually boost the speed of which you can get civics or technology. If we go back to the tech tree, we can see that underneath it says to boost and then the requisite. So for example, writing normally would take 14 turns, but if I boost it by meeting another civilization, I cut that in half, so it would only take 7 turns. Boosting is incredibly useful, and I recommend doing as many of these requisites as you can, especially for the techs that you're planning on getting. So for example, if I wanted to get archery, I would have to plan to kill an enemy unit with a slinger. If I do that, archery gets boosted and takes half the time to build. In this case, the tribal village actually made us skip the requisite for one of the civics here in the civic tree, which is craftsmanship. Normally, to boost craftsmanship, I would have to improve 3 tiles around my city. I didn't do that, but I received the boost because the tribal village actually just gave it to me directly. That's why tribal villages are pretty fantastic. Code of Laws is still chugging along, but once I finish Code of Laws and I start craftsmanship, it's going to take half the time. As you can see, foreign trade needs 40 culture. Craftsmanship also needs 40 culture, but while foreign trade needs 24 turns to complete, craftsmanship only needs 12, thanks to the boost. So that is great. And that is basically your first couple of turns in Civ. We'll get to the next couple of turns in a later episode that I'll make, where we'll finally build a builder and start improving our city's tiles. Until then, this is Tercio. See you later.